Welcome into Fantasy Rant, where I'm your host, Mason Beck, and with me today I got just Lee Cook. Dan's not going to be here for this episode. But what we got today, over the last week, we got some news coming out that Aaron Rodgers finally will be he signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers, a one-year deal worth $13.5 million. I believe only 10 guaranteed, but with incentives up to like $19.5 million. Just one-year deal, of course, with him being that old. A lot of speculation that this was where he was going to go. Took a long time. Aaron Rodgers did his normal thing, dramatized it out for as long as he possibly could. And finally, here we go. He signed with the Steelers. He's been practicing with them. He looks weird in a Steelers uniform. I'm not sure if you've seen that yet, Lee.
It is odd.
Oh, yeah, no, he just doesn't look like a Steeler, like a traditional type of Steeler in that jersey. But really, initially, what are your first thoughts of just Rodgers going there?
Well, I know this is a fantasy show, but just off the fantasy side, I mean, this just feels like a move to win 9 games again, 9 or 10 games, get knocked out in your first playoff game, and kind of where the Steelers have been since Ben left, or really since Ben, lost a step. Not bad enough to be able to draft a high-end quarterback and not good enough to be a true contender. I do think from a fantasy aspect, it's certainly better than going into the season with Mason Rudolph as far as your DK Metcalf, the Muth, even the run game, especially Jaylen Warren catching balls out of the backfield. I mean, it's a positive move for that. But overall, blah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it necessarily, now that he's kind of signed the contract, it changes too much. Personally, with my opinion, I kind of knew this was where, everyone kind of knew that this was either his only option or he was retiring. Steelers obviously didn't make a move at any quarterbacks before this, and only drafted Will Howard in the 5th round, I believe. Was it the 5th or was it the 6th round?
5th or 6th.
Same late round quarterback. This is obviously something we kind of knew was pretty much coming. One thing that kind of really came to my mind when this news kind of dropped was Kirk Cousins. Is he done really now? Falcons really is his last shot that hopefully the Falcons start him? There was some rumors that Steelers would trade for him, but is this really the end of Kirk Cousins, or is he just going to be a backup for maybe the next year or two and then be done? Or have you really put any thought into Kirk Cousins' situation now?
Not a ton, but just with how bad the quarterback play is as a whole, and looking around the league, there's not a surefire starting spot unless the Browns just start cleaning house, because he's probably, assuming he's back to full health. He's an upgrade from 89-year-old Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, and the pair of rookies they have. But I would see probably an unexpected team, early injury in training camp. I could definitely see the Falcons. It's hard to see them paying a backup, so that they're looking for a cheap out, a way to get rid of them. So I really think it's a matter of time. And it'll probably be a team that we're not really expecting that pops up needing a quarterback in the first, 8 weeks of the season. When I say 8 weeks, the 4 weeks of training camp and preseason plus your first 4 weeks of the regular season.
Yeah, that's probably the best option for him, is that hoping he does end up getting traded. I mean, obviously, hopefully nobody gets injured, but once somebody does get injured, that's really what you're hoping if you have him as a dynasty owner. Because right now he's not worth anything, really, in my opinion. I mean, late fourth in a super flex league, maybe. It's kind of that, but also another quarterback that this kind of impacts. It obviously does impact a lot more is Will Howard. Late round pick. We already mentioned that. There was some hope that maybe he would be winning the starting job at some point. Was getting taken late in a lot of rookie drafts. I mean, my opinion, Will Howard is kind of it's a lot harder of a path, obviously. And by next year, if Aaron Rodgers works terribly, like I kind of think he will, uh, I think Will Howard's just going to be that guy that was a backup for a year or two.
I think he's a career backup. I mean, he had so much talent around him. It's kind of hard to evaluate, when you're playing with receivers and running backs like he was. But to me, there's nothing about him that screamed starting NFL quarterback to begin with. I don't think he would have beaten out Mason Rudolph. I don't know that it changes much for him.
Yeah, I mean, he was always a long shot, anyways, even before Rodgers was there. Just a little, late round flyer. But I think now this pretty much drops him out of the fourth round, knowing that he will probably be the third string going into the season with little draft capital invested into him.
Yeah.
Kind of hard.
I'd rather draft Quinn Ewers in the Miami situation for sure, as far as dynasty goes, than Will Howard. And not to say he has a ton of potential, but he has a path, to concussions.
Yeah, I mean, he probably will end up being their backup because they didn't bring in anybody. Miami didn't bring in anybody this year, right? To backup. No, Zach Wilson.
Zach Wilson. Yeah, I mean, he should beat out Zach Wilson.
Yeah, there's a good chance that easily happens. Another quarterback it affects is Mason Rudolph, who was looking like he was going to be the starter. Aaron Rodgers, he's an older guy. Hasn't looked his best the last couple of years. Obviously, he was injured 2 years ago. Do you think Mason Rudolph in Superflex leagues is complete? You should be dropping him now, or do we think that he's still worth a hold in case Rodgers does get injured or he does really struggle? Because Tomlin's the type of guy who I feel like would pull out Rodgers if he was struggling through, say, 6-7 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, these questions depend on your roster construction, but I don't mind holding him, especially, we're 2 years removed now, or from Rodgers missing a whole season, his age, like I say, it could be a play thing where he just doesn't get it done. And, that Mason Rudolph's pretty beloved, in Pittsburgh. It's kind of that scrappy, plucky guy. I don't mind. I don't mind holding him, but if you want to pick up another rookie, maybe with more upside, like if you have a chance to pick up Dylan Gabriel, for example, I'd rather have Dylan Gabriel than Mason Rudolph. And hell, he may not even make the team, but I'd rather take that shot. We kind of know what Rudolph is. So it really just depends on your roster construction and what your other options are.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much said a lot of kind of what I would be putting forward to. Roster construction obviously does matter a lot. I would at least. I mean, I don't think obviously you don't need to save a spot for him unless you're super desperate at the quarterback position. But if let's say leading up to the start of the season or even week one, Rodgers is looking pretty bad, maybe we do lean towards kind of that adding Mason Rudolph if we can to your team just in case Rodgers does continue to struggle throughout the season because Tomlin will bench him. I don't doubt that at all.
And I mean, one thing I'll say, is a lot of it was the record, and yes, especially bringing in Devontae Adams, that there were plenty of weapons there. I mean, Rodgers did finish his QB 15 last year. Russell Wilson obviously didn't play as many games because Fields started the season or was the injury, but Russell Wilson finished his QB 24. How much of an upgrade is he? As far as just winning games, I don't really know, but I do think he's a little bit of an upgrade. Obviously, we've switched out Pickens for DK Metcalf. We've added Caleb Johnson. So I do think, and I mean, the writing was on the wall, but it is a best case scenario at this point. I would have, just because of how bad, I mean, Rodgers gets a lot of gruff, and some of it is just his personality. He's just a douchebag. But he did look better than Kirk Cousins last year, and that's not saying much, but he looked better than Kirk Cousins. So I do think this was the best option, kind of the best of a bunch of bad options. And we'll see what the Arthur Smith offense looks like. But I mean, it's serviceable from fantasy perspective anyway.
Yeah, no, I mean that's what I kind of think. I mean, Rodgers doesn't look like the MVP he necessarily does, that he was years ago.
Sure.
Obviously he's not awful anymore. People, just like you're saying, he's a douchebag. People hate him, so the narrative is obviously that they want to really paint him as the villain, and that's what you get when you kind of have that attitude. But he finished as I believe QB 15, and I believe 6-point passing touchdowns, or that might be 4-point. But
I was just checking the league score, and I can double check that. But yeah, it was 15, and I believe 6-point passing touchdowns.
Yeah, okay, but I mean, 15 is very good in a super flex league. You're starting him pretty much every week. I mean, I'm pretty sure he had some pretty bad weeks in the mix, but he only dropped out of the top 24 1, 2, 3 times. And so, I mean, he was a top 24 quarterback every single week of the season besides those weeks. And even had 4 top 10 finishes. Pretty solid numbers. Mike Tomlin's still there. I think he is still serviceable this year if he stays healthy. If his arm can still hold up. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer. He's still got the game knowledge. That's not slipping from him. It's just whether or not his arm can really hold up enough to keep him in the game and provide enough wins.
Yeah. Let me paint you a scenario, just see what your thoughts is. Let's say you are a contender. Maybe you didn't win the championship. Maybe you were runner-up, or you got beat in the semifinals last year. You're in a super flex. And let's say you have, throw out some names. You have Jared Goff is your one starting quarterback. Your other starting quarterback is really anybody, but let's say Drake May. So you're Jared Goff and Drake May, and you have no viable QB3. You feel like you can win a championship this year. What would you be willing to pay for Rodgers?
If I feel like I could win a championship this year, I mean, I haven't really looked into Rodgers too much, what people are kind of selling him for. But my kind of first estimate would be like I wouldn't mind trading my third if I really think I'm going to be a contender, and I think Rodgers is going to start the entire season because it's going to be like if you win, it's the 3-12, not a ton of value anyways, and that pick practically a fourth. So I would say that just because, in Superflex, quarterback is a little more valuable. So during season, you got to pay more for even 1-year rentals on quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably, especially if it's a rebuilding team, obviously they need to sell Rodgers. He probably, with a little bit of uncertainty was cheaper a week ago. But, I mean, I think a 3 is reasonable. I think a 2 for Rodgers and a 3 is reasonable. So just moving down around. Because a lot of times people do value a second much higher than a third, for good reason. So, yeah, I think either one of those trades, in that scenario, or maybe Justin Fields is your second starter. You need somebody that you can plug and play in that super flex spot. Maybe you're really good. Maybe you got Jaden Daniels, Justin Fields, and nobody else. Insulate yourself against some injuries. Maybe Fields gets benched again. There's a lot of scenarios. It's a 12-team league. Not everybody's going to have 3 starters. I mean, just the math says you've got 32 starters and 36 spots if we're counting QB 1 through 3. So there's definitely value there. If I have him and I'm rebuilding, I'm certainly trying to get a second. But I might do the third and Rodgers for a second. I might do Rodgers in a second for a first if you can really find somebody maybe somebody's got DK Metcalf and they're trying to complete a stack and they feel like they can win this year.
I don't think I've heard of anyone going for the Rodgers Metcalf stack. I don't think that's necessarily a hot thing around the fantasy world right now.
It is now.
Yeah. I mean, some people will probably do it in redraft, but I don't think anybody in dynasties necessarily, jumping the gun to make that stack happen.
If Justin Fields is their quarterback too, I mean, those are the things you can also, like when you're making those trades, those are the things you can sell. Because even though it's very likely a 1 year combination, people go crazy over stacks. People overvalue stacks in dynasty, especially when there's that age gap. The numbers say that best ball, that's the way to win best ball, but obviously dynasty is a different animal.
Yeah. And then last thing I kind of wanted to touch really about Rodgers, though, honestly, because DK is obviously the number one. Pat Freiermuth should be the number 2 target. DK, really can kind of excel off of the deep ball, which when you got a 41-year-old quarterback, it tends to kind of get scary when throwing the deep ball. They might not have the ability to do that as often. Do you see any of these other – I'm going to go through the wide receiver list that I kind of think of anyone who really has a chance of getting any, valuable catches, any play time. Calvin Austin, Robert Woods, Roman Wilson, Scotty Miller. I mean, those are the only guys I'm looking at this list that to me really have
Scotty had a few good games in Tampa, 2 or 3 years ago. Roman Wilson, for sure. I mean, it gives you hope if you're somebody, and I did stash a little bit of him, on some taxi squads, especially with them getting rid of Pickens, bringing in Rodgers. We did see, and I mean, here's the thing. How long before – I don't know what the contract situation is, but how far behind is Adam Lazard? God, what was the other really old receiver they brought into the Jets from the Packers? Oh God,
was it MVS? No, not it. Did they have MVS for a second?
I don't think so. I don't think with Rodgers. I feel like there was somebody else though.
You might be right, but obviously it was nobody.
I mean, he was old as dirt.
It was Randall Cobb. They brought
Randall Cobb. So how far behind is Randall Cobb and Adam Lazard? And I mean, that would kill Roman Wilson's hope for this season. But yeah. I liked him in college. He's kind of that possession, be that slot guy for him. So I see some upside for Roman Wilson.
No, I mean, he, in my opinion, is the only one of those that really has any upside at all out of that wide receiver room besides DK. It's really a awful kind of room unless Roman Wilson can really step up. Calvin Austin's going to get, his catches here and there, especially if Roman Wilson doesn't step up. Calvin Austin might be a viable, somewhat, desperate flex play.
Yeah.
But Darnell Washington is also someone that kind of interests me when you got a veteran like Rodgers. If, nobody else is stepping up besides DK, they might decide to really use the tight ends a lot more. And I've seen, Darnell Washington, I believe this is year 3 we're going into. That's kind of when tight ends typically, historically, take that step up. So maybe he's someone that you can be looking into. Very, very, not really a ton of trade value for him at all. He's probably a free agent in most leagues. Yeah, rostered only 27% of dynasty leagues.
Yeah. I mean, he's a mountain of a man.
But all right. Do you got anything else to add about Rodgers?
I'll be glad when he retires and we don't have to talk about him anymore.
Yeah, I don't think either of us were too excited about this news. And, I mean, most of the football community knew this was coming. So it's really just we can finally talk about what we've been thinking was going to be the situation anyways. DK, nobody's really moving up or down my rankings, whether it's Rodgers and nobody in the QB, nobody in that offensive team at all is moving up or down in the rankings. We've been planning for this, I feel like.
Yeah, agreed. And it may be just kind of at the beginning, it may, because we know DK is signed up long term, it may keep them just good enough to not be able to draft a high-end quarterback. And whatever happens in the next few years, DK may just be in quarterback purgatory for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Tomlin's ever going to tank, so that definitely could be the case. All right, thank you very much for watching this video. If you made it this far, we appreciate you joining us. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Check out Stadium Rant YouTube channel or Stadium Rant website for more sports content, fantasy content. We cover all different sort of things. Yeah, have a good one. Take it easy.
Peace.